Welcome to Mooney Reads. It is July, which means we have passed the halfway mark for the year, and it's time to do a bit of a mid-year check-in. So I'm going to be going over a little bit of stats briefly, and then I'm going to be doing the tag. So during the first half of 2024, I have read 52 books, which equals about 10,000 pages. I set my number of books to read this year pretty low. I actually set it at 50, so I have surpassed that. I'm not really focused so much on the number of books. I mostly just want to finish what I start, and actually read things that I like, focus on the various TBRs and projects that I have. So 52 is a good number, I guess. So far as the breakdown of fiction versus nonfiction, I'm at 39% nonfiction, 61% fiction, which is about my norm, which I wanted to keep, at least a third nonfiction or more. I've hit that, so we're good. I will say I do kind of wish that I could see this in page number as well as number of books, because my nonfiction, for my nonfiction, 2 of those are graphic novels and 5 of them were zines, which were pretty short. And for my fiction, about 15 of those were graphic novels. And at least one of them was a single issue. But regardless, I think this is still a pretty good spread. About 10% of my books have been audiobooks, which is about 5 books, which is almost 1 per month, which is pretty good. I like having audiobook as an option because I can do other things while I listen, but with the way my brain is, I can't always do audiobooks, but I think that's pretty good. And then I think this chart also shows how many digital books, which it's not really totally accurate because some of those are zines that I accessed online, but I printed out. So it's really more like I've only read 2 ebooks, which I'm very bad at reading ebooks. So far as my reading moods go, according to Storygraph, the biggest mood that I end up reading is emotional books. About a quarter of the books I read are emotional. And then the next highest groups are reflective, lighthearted, hopeful, and adventurous. So there's variety, which is nice. On average, I'm rating books 4.31 stars, which is technically a little bit higher than last year's average and my all-time average, but not by too much. What that ends up looking like is 16 5-star books, 25 books that are 4.5 or higher. Looking month by month, my best reading months in terms of quantity were January and March. I read 11 books in each of those months, and I think I read about the same page counts, but I did read more 5-star books in January than March. I will say one thing that I did not look into was the number of library books that I've read this year. So I think maybe I'll try to keep a tally of that. A little bit better perhaps, because I feel like I've been reading more library books this year. Now that we're done with the little bit of stats, we can move on to the tag. Now I will say I've watched a few different people's tag videos, but the person that I ended up pulling the tag from, I think altered it a little bit, but I liked her version, so I just went with the questions, at least most of the questions that she had, as Books and Lala. But of course, the originator of the Mid-Year Freakout Tag is also going to be found in the description. I already sort of answered the first question, which is, how is your book or reading year going? I think it's going pretty well. I'm reading a lot of cool stuff. It's not going exactly as I planned because some of my kind of more specific reading lists that I put together at the beginning of the year have not really been going as I thought they might. Part of it is that I just need to buy more printer ink, because I was wanting to read more of the academic articles that went along with the books, And as soon as I wasn't able to do that, it just went completely off the rails. However, I've still read books that are adjacent to a lot of the topics I was interested in anyways. And I'm in the middle, I think past the middle at this point, of a really big book that I've been wanting to read for a long time, that also is tangential to those things. So things might not be going as planned, but they're still going well. The next question is, what is the best book of 2024 so far? My favorite so far. And of course, I can't answer a question with only one book, so I have 3, and I'll talk about them in the order that I read them. My first favorite that I read this year was Imagination, a Manifesto by Ruha Benjamin. This is a nonfiction book that looks at the role of imagination in liberation. It looks at how imagination has been suppressed, especially for Black Americans, and it talks about why it's so important to be able to kind of imagine the future in this sort of big way. And what I really loved about this, like, it's about this kind of big concept, but she also has concrete examples. So examples of how marginalized people have imagined something better and created it, but also the dangers of only having one particular point of view when imagining certain things. So pulling examples from history in that regard as well. It is excellent. I read it during a vlog, during my astrology vlog. So if you want to hear more of my thoughts, you can go there. But it was incredible. My next favorite read was This Is What a Lesbian Looks Like: Dyke Activists Take on the 21st Century. This is a backlist nonfiction essay collection by leftist lesbians in the late 90s. So this was published in 99, and there is such a diverse array of people who are in here. There is a mix of races and genders and people with different disabilities. And it's looking at lesbianism in a really sort of expansive way. And even though this was, like I said, published in the late 90s, I feel like so much of this is still so relevant right now. The president's got a different name. We're having a war in a different country. But unfortunately, history sometimes feels like a flat circle. But the stuff that they have to say is really cool. Obviously, the language is going to be outdated. That's the nature of reading an older book. A lot of the times when I read an anthology, there are a couple that are really good, a couple that are really bad, and then a bunch in the middle. But this skewed way more towards really, really good. I don't really think there are any that really should be skipped. I think there was maybe 1 or 2 that felt a little weird. But I highly recommend it if you can get your hands on a copy. And then my third favorite is a fiction one, and that is The Deep and Dark by Molly Knox Tag. I was so excited to hear that she put out a new graphic novel because I adored the Witch Boy series. I also really liked Girl from the Sea. This is chunky and deals with darker stuff than some of her other books. And I love so much about this that I know if I start talking about it, it'll just be way longer than you want to hear. And it's kind of hard to talk about without spoilers, but trust me that it's incredible. If you like queer graphic novels or YA graphic novels, definitely pick this one up. And if you want to hear more about this, I do talk about it more in detail in my wrap-up. The next question is, what is the best sequel you have read? I'll be honest, I haven't read that many sequels this year, or generally. I don't read a lot of series unless they're graphic novels. But my favorite has been Heartstopper Volume 5. I definitely read a good chunk of this online before it was published, but I sat and read the whole thing cover to cover, and it's Heartstopper. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be cute. I'm super excited for the 3rd season to come out in August, I think. Anyways, yeah, Heartstopper. The next question is your favorite reread, but I haven't done any rereading. No cover-to-cover rereads. I have, adjacent to rereading, I have been trying to go through the nonfiction that I read and extract quotes from it. I have a couple of notebooks that I've been working with, and kind of going through the books that I read to really retain stuff a little bit more easily. I don't think that really counts as a full reread, though. I don't remember if it was this year or last year or both that I said that I wanted to do more rereading, but that's something that needs to happen more in the second half of the year. Next, we have genres you've been loving / reading the most. I think towards the beginning of the year, I was reading more middle grade than normal, which is great. More recently, I've been reading more backlist than usual. And like further back in the backlist, not just things that have been published in like the 2020s. There's got to be a better word for this decade than that. But like I've been reading a lot more stuff, more focused on like the 90s and stuff like that. And then in general, I've been reading a lot of graphic novels. It seems like I tend to have at least one day that I just, in each month or in most months, where I just sit and read several graphic novels, 2 or more in a day, because it's just the vibe that day. Next, we have new releases that you haven't read but want to read. And there are kind of a lot. I whittled it down to 4 fiction and 4 nonfiction, and I'm going to rapid fire through these. First, we have Grease Paint by Hannah Levine. Interesting or weird format. Lesbians in the 1950s. The Room of One's Own Bookstore mentioned it as one that you should read if you liked Love Lies Bleeding. And I have a whole list of books based on Love Lies Bleeding that I really want to do like a vlog or like something for. This is one of those. I'm super stoked. We have Most Ardently, which you've probably heard about if you are tapped into any part of the YA book internet. Pride and Prejudice but trans. The Prospects. Baseball but trans. I don't know anything about baseball, but I think it's going to be good. And then Little Rot by Akwaeke Emezi. I am so behind in Akwaeke Emezi stuff, which is sad because I really, really loved their first like 3 or 4 books that I read. But I couldn't not just like immediately buy this. I'll be honest, I don't know too much about it, but if Akwaeke Emezi writes it, I'm going to buy it and read it. So that was fiction. Now I have 4 nonfiction. A Place of One's Own, 6 Spaces That Shaped Queer Women's Culture. Rebel Girl by Kathleen Hanna, who is the lead singer of Bikini Kill and several other bands. Down with the System by Serge Tankian, who is the lead singer of System of a Down. And Radiant, The Life and Line of Keith Haring. And I guess I lied a little bit when I said that I had 4 and 4 because I also have Triple Sec, which I don't own a copy of yet, but it's polyamorous, and the back sounds cool. And then after that, we have anticipated releases for the second half of the year. I'm not super tapped into what's going to be published, and to be honest, I already have clearly so many books that have already been published that I need to read, but I would really like to get to Compound Fracture by Andrew Joseph White. I have his 2 other books that I have yet to read, but I know are going to be incredible. And Cubs and Campfires by Dylan Drakes. This is an indie romance featuring 2 bears. When do we see that? Like I just, and if you have seen that before, let me know. But I'm excited, and I've never read anything by him, but I saw the cover, just like on Instagram, so I went ahead and pre-ordered the ebook. So those are the 2 that I could think of that I would like to get to. The next question is, what was your biggest disappointment? And I actually have 3 of these. I wouldn't call any of them super catastrophic, but it was like, I had kind of certain expectations and they weren't really met. First, I have What's Your Pronoun Beyond He and She by Dennis Barron. And this was like a 3.5 read. The stuff that I did find cool was like the historic look at pronouns in like the early 1900s. I thought that that was interesting. But he then tries to put it together with modern day discourse on pronouns and stuff, and I think that falls really flat. I don't think that he talks about enough. And if you want to hear more details, I have a full video on this book. This was the first book that I read for the list that I put together of books that are kind of focused around queer linguistics. I'm glad that I read this one first because it does give kind of interesting historical background, and I also have a little bit more confidence that some of the other books are going to be better, so better to go up from here, I suppose. But yeah, this wasn't what I thought it was going to be, and the politics of this was just not it, and I didn't think that some of the analysis was as rigorous as it could have been. The next book that I had that was kind of disappointing was Plantains and Our Becoming, which is a poetry collection, and I don't love to criticize poetry collections, especially when they come from really personal places, but some of this was just a really big miss for me. I do think that there are some good pieces in this. I elaborate a bit more in my wrap-up, actually, so maybe you'll want to check that out. But despite like the really good pieces, the ones that were more trite and relied on like phrases and stereotypes that are very like lukewarm, liberal, icky feeling. There were so many of those in the mix that it really put me off. Like I said, I talk about it more in the wrap up, so you can check that out if you want a little bit more detail. And the last one is also a poetry book, Falling Back in Love with Being Human by Kai Cheng Tom. I read another one of her books last year, her other essay collection, and I really liked it. And I was actually thinking like that it would be cool to see what she has to say, especially post-COVID and stuff like that. So I was super stoked to hear that she was coming out with another book. I didn't really know that it was going to be poetry. I thought it would be more essays, but I like poetry, so that's fine. Each one of these is written kind of like a letter. Some of them are good, but there was some that fell flat. There was also a lot of repetition. I also talk about this one in a wrap-up, so I'll just link that. But it was just not quite what I expected, and then also, like, fell flat outside of that as well. Next, we have Your Biggest Surprise, and for that, surprise, surprise, I have 3 books as well. The Honeys by Ryan LaSala. Like, I'd heard good things about Ryan LaSala's stuff, specifically The Honeys, and I'd read, the one about cosplay, Bedazzled. I'd read Bedazzled before, and I really liked it. It was cute. It was a contemporary. This is horror. Still YA, but horror. I listened to the audiobook of this, and it blew my mind. This is another one that I read for my astrology vlog, so if you want more details, you can check that out. But between the like just mind fuckiness of it all, and the really like uniquely written body horror, some of the stuff with the characters, there's just so much here, and it was so good. And like, it's not like I expected it to be bad, but I just listened to it, and I was like, okay, you know, this is a book, I'll probably like it, but it ended up being super good. So it was a surprise kind of in that way. The next one is Cat on a Hot Tin Roof by Tennessee Williams. I don't really read a lot of plays. I have in the past, mostly for like school and stuff. I have an English degree, so of course I had to read a lot of plays, but I didn't read Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. I figured it would be good because I'd heard good things about it from people who I trust. But it ended up exceeding my expectations and being extra chaotic. This is another one that I read for my astrology blogs. And then the final one is The Woods All Black by Lee Mandello. I was fucking obsessed with Summer Suns and read it twice the year that I read it. I really liked their other one as well. I'm blanking on the name, but the wolf one. This one, like, both of their other books were pretty different from each other. And this one falls more in line with Summer Suns, but is still very different. And I didn't really know what to expect. I just know I love Lee Mandello. It's horror. I think I might have heard that it was T for T beforehand too, which just compelled me to read it more quickly. But I was not prepared. It starts out being a very 20s infused Southern Gothic story, so very atmospheric, a little bit slow but very foreboding, like, you know, the imminent danger, but like still with that distance that you get kind of with horror, or not horror, with Gothic literature. And then somewhere along the line, near like the middle of the book, it turns into a sexy, gory, weird mess. And I didn't expect anything about this book, but I really enjoyed it. The next question is a new favorite author, debut or new to you. And I don't really have an answer for that necessarily. I did think about this question for a while and didn't really come up with an answer for it. So I don't really know. I've obviously read good stuff, and not all of it is by authors that I've read before, but nothing that really stood out to me as someone who I can call a new favorite author, especially if I've only read like one of their books or, you know, what have you. So I don't have an answer for this. But next we have a new favorite character. I think in the original version this is like book crush or something like that, but I don't tend to have book crushes really. So new favorite character is much better. And again, no one super stood out to me except in What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher, which I would absolutely recommend. Very atmospheric, Southern Gothic, but like also really funny. Like this, by the end of this, I was like jumping at every single little noise. But it was also like a joy to read. Specifically, the character Eugene Potter, who is a secondary character that is loosely based on the author of Peter Rabbit. She is just this weird little lady who is obsessed with mushrooms, and I love her. And I added in another question that kind of riffs off of this one, which is a relatable character, because I wanted to talk about A Touch of Ruckus. It's been a minute since I read it, and I didn't really prepare a synopsis, so it's best to look at the wrap up and just click through to that one. But I really enjoyed it, and the main character was so relatable that I almost had to put the book down. The experience of being the people-pleasing eldest daughter, it kind of hit a nerve. But I really like what they were able to do with this, and also how some of the magical elements were paralleled with some of the interpersonal things going on. So it was very relatable, and I ended up really liking the character and really enjoying the resolution that they were able to come to within the plot. The next question is a book that made you cry. Quite a lot of books make me cry. I'm a crier. I'm a Pisces with a Cancer rising. That's just kind of how it is. But I picked two in particular that made me cry in two different ways. First, we have Too Bright to See, which is another middle grade, and it focuses on a trans kid who has just recently lost their uncle, It's them kind of trying to navigate beginning middle school and friends and stuff like that, while also figuring out gendery stuff. My heart could not take it reading this. A lot of parts of their experience I felt very much, especially around like their relationship with people, and then some of the stuff on gender dysphoria. Again, like with all of these, if you want kind of more details, I have wrap-ups that talk a little bit more. This one made me cry for a variety of reasons. There was the grief aspect, there was the relatability aspect, and there was the resolution that was positive. Multiple reasons to cry in that one. And then the other one that I have is The Gifts of the Body by Rebecca Brown, which is one of those backlist books I was talking about earlier. This was published in, I think, 1994, definitely the early 90s, and focuses on someone who is a nurse's aide to people with AIDS. So she goes around to different people's houses. Each chapter is kind of like a vignette that focuses on a different theme. But this definitely made me cry. And it, like I said, published in the early 90s. This was when the AIDS epidemic in the US, it was just really bleak. And this book did such a good job, I think, relaying the sort of like feeling. It's a similar feeling to a lot of the other books that I've been reading about this time period. The kind of combination of like sadness and despair, but also a sort of distance that I think is necessary for a lot of people to keep going. So that was devastating, but it is a very good book. Next we have books that made you happy. And for this, I have The Tea Dragon Society, which was just so cute, and also made me cry a little bit too, but in like the happy way. One of my favorite graphic novels last year was Mothkeeper, which is by the same author, and that one, the sort of themes, just the way that everything plays out was so warm and healing. And I could see that in some of the details of the Tea Dragon Society. It didn't necessarily hit the same way as Mothkeeper, but it was also smaller and kind of a simpler story. But it was still very wholesome and very warm, and it made me very happy. And then the next one was Breathe. This is about binding, and about people's experiences with binding. And the thing that made me so happy about it was that it was taking this research that this person had done and was putting it into a digestible sort of form, that a bunch of people are reading now and getting a lot from, and that just made my researcher heart really happy. Next we have the most beautiful books that I have bought, and that's kind of a hard question. I don't have any like pretty special editions that I bought or anything like that, but I did want to show two categories of things. The first one is a single book, A Short History of Trans Misogyny, and I thought the cover was very pretty. And then the other one is more of like a category. Since I read This Is What a Lesbian Looks Like, I bought several anthologies, older anthologies that were written by or contributed also by some of the people who were in that one. Some of these are cuter than others, but I just love the vibe. So we have Yours in Struggle, which I bought because of Minnie Bruce Pratt. Queerly Classed, Gay Men and Lesbians Write About Class, which I think I got because of Susan Raffo. An Intimate Wilderness, Lesbian Writers on Sexuality, which I actually found at a library sale. These other ones I intentionally got off of thrift books. This one I just found, and it has people like Joan Nestle, who I have looked out for books for because of This Is What a Lesbian Looks Like. It has Gloria Anzaldúa, Audre Lorde, Sarah Schulman, Adrienne Rich, a lot of names, and it was $1. We have Closer to Home, Bisexuality and Feminism, which I think was referenced in one of the essays, and This Is What a Lesbian Looks Like. Then we have Sister and Brother, Lesbians and Gay Men Write About Their Lives Together, which Joan Nestle. Then we have What is your favorite video or post that you've done? And I think the most fun project that I've done so far this year was my astrology vlog, and it ended up being super long. It's a 3-part, pretty long one. So, you know, I didn't anticipate that too many people will actually watch it, but it was a really fun project to do. I tend to really like the vlogs and stuff, and I love astrology, I love books, so it was just perfect and a really fun time. And then the last question on there is to shout out some of the people that you've been watching recently, and stuff like that. I don't have anyone necessarily prepared, but I'll tag some people that I've been enjoying content from recently in the description. So that's the tag. Let me know in the comments some of your favorite books that you've read so far this year. And thank you all so much for watching. Bye.